Greetings on this Christ the King Sunday. Christ the King Sunday, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, the first big family gathering, the first event of the holiday season in the pandemic. For some, the first time without a loved one, either having lost them to COVID or other ways to die. There's people with friends and family missing this year. And they're not gathered around the table, maybe not because of death, but because of separation. And also because, unfortunately, of political differences. This will be a different year for giving thanks. So in the church, we focus on Christ the King Sunday, the very last Sunday of the liturgical year. Next Sunday will be the beginning of our season of Advent, and we will get ready to receive our infant Lord on Christmas Day. Today is also the culmination of our sermon series in Kingdom Parables. And today we look at the parable that is the culmination of all of them in Matthew. This parable, Matthew 25, starting with verse 31, is the parable of judgment that puts both fear in our bones and has a laugh for us of surprise. This is the parable that brings together all the elements of all the parables. It brings together the idea that the kingdom is universal, or Catholic with a lowercase c, as they say, that it is inclusive, that the kingdom is a place for all of us. It's also that the kingdom is relatable, that the kingdom is not something far off and far away and up in the clouds, but the kingdom is here and the kingdom is now. It also brings to the point that the kingdom is something that is not achieved with good works, but rather with faith. And I know you may be looking at this parable and knowing what it says and saying, wait, this is very much about good works. It's really more about faith. You see, what's astonishing about it is that finally, Jesus says the sheep will be separated from the goats. So Jesus calls the faithful people, a part of the kingdom, sheep. Sheep not smart. Sheep belong to someone else. They just follow wherever they're led. And sheep unknowingly have been faithful. So this is how the gospel goes. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when we read that, we can pat ourselves on the back. Happened this week. We fed hungry people through our church programs here at Ocean View. We found families in a local elementary school. They were identified by the school, and we made Thanksgiving baskets for them, and they were delivered this morning as I'm preaching this sermon. We fed the hungry. And we've been doing it throughout the time that we've spent in this pandemic, feeding the hungry. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. Well, we can also pat ourselves on the back. Any of you who stood at the water stations that we've done and our churches left the building and gave out water to people who were jogging or walking or exercising on the sidewalk. This is all before the pandemic, of course. You know that you gave a cool cup of water in the name of Jesus Christ. I don't know if that's the extent of what he meant. Living in an arid and desert area, being thirsty meant something very different than it does here in Juno Beach. Maybe the person that gave you something to drink like what Jesus did with the woman at the well. I was thirsty for things that couldn't satisfy me, for the kind of water where I'd never be thirsty again. And you gave me something to drink. Where were we when someone needed to hear a word of hope, a word of faith, an example of what it means to follow Jesus, and we didn't offer the cup? I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. And the next one is a little bit harder for us. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Ooh, that is a tough one. That's a tough one because stranger danger, right? When I went on vacation by myself one summer while I was in seminary, before I was married or anything like that, I was visiting my friend in San Francisco. He's living there in the Sunset District, and during the day, he and his roommates went to work, and so I would go off touring. I went down to the Fisherman's Wharf and I toured Alcatraz, and everywhere I went, I was, touring by myself. And so I had one of those little disposable cameras, and I would stop people on tours with me or wherever I was and ask them to take my picture. It was before selfies and cell phones. And when I approached this one man at the Ghirardelli Square when I had my Ghirardelli sundae and I was eating the ice cream, he looked at me with terror in his eyes. Either she's going to ask me for money or tell me about Jesus. And I just asked him to take my picture. And he kind of off balance because I had interrupted him or I had spoken to him and he doesn't know me and I don't know him. And then he warmed when he found out that all he would have to do is snap the picture and hand me back the camera. But we don't like strangers. We don't like strangers talking to us. I do it a lot. When I'm in a good emotional space, I'll be like, hi, how are you? Or I remember walking into Publix the day that Prince died and telling some strange man, he's like, hey, how are you? And I don't know him. And I said, Prince died. He goes, what? And I said, I'm so sorry, but that's how I am. I'm in a bad place. And he was like, now I am too. Thanks a lot. And I was like, I'm sorry. But, we'd had a moment there because we both are maybe probably in the same generation, the minority generation. And we know who Prince was, and Prince had died that day, and this is years ago. But I talk to people, and sometimes they're afraid. But we are afraid to talk to people in this day and age, aren't we? I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Who might you be welcoming that you don't know who they are yet? You haven't met them yet. You haven't encountered them yet. They might be a friend into the future or maybe more. The next one was, I was sick. And in this translation it says, and you took care of me. In this pandemic, we can't help but think about our first responders and people who are working in hospitals, putting their lives on the line, getting in direct contact with people with COVID symptoms that are dying of COVID, and trying to help them make it another day. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to doctors and nurses and certified nursing aides and janitorial services and the people that work in the food services, in nutrition and dietitians for the hospitals. Every person that comes into contact with patients is an angel in disguise, is doing what Jesus asked us to do to him. I was sick and you took care of me. And it also makes me think of the people who are at the bedside of loved ones either suffering with Alzheimer's, dementia, or chronic illnesses like Parkinson's and cancer. What are we going to do without our caretakers? That marriage vow that says, to death do us part, they're taking it seriously, and they're isolated, and there is no help, and there is hope. When you call them up or you send them a card and you know what they're struggling with, and you say, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. I was sick and you took care of me. But do we do that enough? Or do we keep the sick at arm's length for our own protection and our own comfort? I think the one we have the hardest time with, though, is the last one. I was in prison, and you visited me. Raise your hand if you've ever visited anyone in prison. You see, I'm not raising my hand. And we learned through the last parables that the time may be up. It may be too late to do the things that our Lord has called us to do. Many, many people are in prison. Many, many people are in prison in a way, in our nation especially, that may not be equitable and fair. And we need to question that, but we also need to care for people who are in prison. There's a ministry that is supported by Crave, an organization my sister-in-law, Reverend Shelley Denmark, runs. And there are Crave leaders and there are people, young people starting nonprofits. And one of them is caring for female prisoners in Florida. A former corrections officer is running that nonprofit to care for the families of women who are imprisoned. If you'd like to have more information about that, you can contact me and email me if there's something you'd like to do for that organization, especially over the holidays. I was in prison and you visited me. If you look through the New Testament, you see stories of Paul being cared for while he was in prison for the gospel. And of course, the political powers that be, the stories that were being told about what Paul was doing, there were a lot of people on board with, he should be in prison. He is a danger to our society. And so it was controversial to support Paul and be an ally for him while he was in prison. But they did. You know why? Because they knew what Jesus said when he told this parable. I was in prison and you visited me. It's the one we don't do as well as we could. There is Kairos Ministry, something you can get involved with, where you take a fourth-day retreat into a correction facility. It's a wonderful ministry, and I'm not a part of it. I don't do it. And I have to reconcile myself with that. And as I look at this list of all these ways in which the Lord said, come now into the kingdom. Let me open the doors for you, because when I was hungry, when I was thirsty, when I was a stranger, when I was sick, when I was in prison. And the thing that turns this parable for all of us on its head, me carrying around my guilt about not going to prisons and not caring enough for the sick, me carrying around the things that I just don't do enough, I'm never going to do enough for these groups of people. What happens next in the parable is a surprise. Because the people that the Lord welcomed in said, wait, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or sick or in prison? I mean, we don't focus on this enough. We just focus on the list. They were surprised. They were like, wait, what? That's the thing you're talking about? Oh. It's that third way power. Right? They were focusing on other things that they might be doing to get themselves into the kingdom, to get favor with Jesus. It had to be something else. It can't be these normal things we're doing all the time to take care of our community. And then Jesus says, wait, it is. That's exactly what it is, my little sheep. That's exactly what it is. Because they weren't doing it intentionally to get somewhere else. They were just doing it because that's what they're doing. They're living out their faith, taking care of their community by feeding the hungry, by making sure nobody went thirsty, by welcoming the stranger. caring for the sick, and visiting the prisons. It was something they were already doing, and they were doing it to the Lord. Maybe you can take a deep breath and exhale and see the places in your life where you are already doing the things that Jesus asks you to do. Maybe you don't know it quite yet. Maybe you need further encouragement to continue on that path. Maybe you will be surprised by how welcomed you are into the kingdom. So take heart. Continue to let that urging inside of you help you to feed the hungry, help you to offer the living water, perhaps, to those who are thirsty, help you to welcome the stranger every day in many ways, and care for those who are sick, even if it's just writing a card and sending it. And then lastly, that challenge to go into places that are so foreign to so many of us and visit the prisons. That's the list. But I hope you will be surprised by the way God is working in your life. And in this Thanksgiving, can we be grateful that we have enough food on our table? Can we be grateful that we have the spiritual nurturing of living water in our lives to whatever degree that might be? May we be thankful that we aren't strangers, at least in our church family or maybe in our neighborhoods. May we be thankful that we have health, and may we be thankful for our freedom, that we are not in prison. And those are what we need to be grateful for. But moreover than all those things, we need to be grateful that Jesus includes us and welcomes us into the kingdom. Thanks be to God for that. Stay home, stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, and take care of one another in the best way you can. God bless you.